All right, day 2, Tuesday. Just gonna share this. So talking about, again, EFT, emotional freedom techniques. We work with the body's healing cycle. So in theory, the body should always be auto-regulating. The moments when it doesn't, let's minimize me, is when there's a stress trigger. And that can be seen as a Yuden moment in my world. Unexpected, dramatic, probably emotional, I mean by dramatic, isolating, and you had no strategy. So that kind of shock moment, that's the freeze response in the nervous system. That is where we either do the fight, flight, or freeze moment. Then the body goes into that stress phase, loads of adrenaline running, and then there's some kind of resolution, whether it's an internal decision you make or an external solution. And then the body goes into that regeneration phase. That's when everything kind of inflames. The symptoms basically show up for most part, depending on what's going on. They sometimes show up here, but a lot of the time when it's regeneration phase, that's when the fluid fills, that's when, everything starts to show up symptomatically, and you're like, oh, what happened here? I don't know why I'm feeling this, or I've got this suddenly. And more often than not, when you look back in the timeline, something happened and the body is now back into auto-regulation. And so with EFT, we look at the symptoms, and we also do some detective work and see if there has been some kind of stress moment or freeze response in the nervous system. Because, yeah, it's really fascinating how we do not fully process what we needed to process in certain moments, especially as children. And I do a lot of kind of inner work with a thing called matrix re-imprinting, but that's another world. And so quite often, if you think of something that's really clear in your mind, it can be something bad that happened. And that's when the body froze. Even though it was like 10 years ago, it's still really clear in your mind. That's when the nervous system had this shock response, similar to feigning dead, that animals do in the wild. But what they do is shake it off and get on with life, whereas we just let it sit there, and then we are, end up trying to avoid feeling it. We drink ourselves to whatever oblivion. We go shopping too much. We end up like soothing ourselves in certain ways, unconsciously most of the time, or eat to numb so that we don't feel. There's so many different ways that we all deal with emotion, unprocessed emotion, and all the body really needs to do is finish what it didn't finish in that moment in the nervous system. Like, have that good cry, have that emotional support. More often than not, it's like this isolating, suddenly potential death kind of feeling in the nervous system, and the body has reacted, but it hasn't finished the full cycle through the nervous system to be calm again. The thing animals do is freeze, and then they have this shake off thing, and basically what we need to do through tapping and EFT is that release from the energy system. So hopefully that makes sense. So when we're tapping, we're like releasing and clearing out that energy flow. So it's like the LA freeways, it's like can get really backed up and congested if we didn't process what happened. Usually it happens as a child, and we have come up with coping mechanisms and belief systems about ourselves to deal with it. And it can manifest in so many different ways in different people. But once we get beyond that, it's amazing how people's perspectives change, how their body feels lighter, their symptoms physically just clear up. It's just incredible. So really, I see our energy system as this blueprint for everything else physical that builds upon it. And so when the nervous system is more regulated, and I do tapping with the younger self, so it gets pretty cool. It's very exciting work. And so when that part of us that's frozen, that hasn't processed when it needed to process at 8 years old, it comes back. It's not stuck trying to run the adult life. And it worked at the time, but when you're 40 or whatever, that 8-year-old is still making you scared or sabotaging you. It's that part of us that we need to reassure, validate, and allow to be seen.